Episode 2 of the cruiser build. So in this episode I'm going to go over how I made the Episode 2 of the cruiser build. So in this video I'm going to show you how I made up my front guards and these rock sliders. I actually made them both at the same time, but I'll probably put all the footage of the rock sliders towards the end of the video. But we'll just have a quick yap about the front guards first. Alrighty guys, the whole reason I made up these tube guards was because the factory 40 series guards only come to about here. And because I'm running the 80 series chassis and diffs, they're a lot wider than the 40 series. So that would mean most of the tyre would be exposed if I just had the factory guards. Now I've seen some people chop and extend the factory ones, which would look pretty good for like an old school restoration. But I went with this tube look. I was originally going to sheet the top in steel and then weld everything for a nice sort of seamless finish. But I do sort of like the look of a two-tone, like I'll have the tube work black and the top the same color as the car. And I went with this sort of bolt look as well, just because the 40s are sort of covered in bolts everywhere, so it just makes it a bit more old school looking. I've also gone out and bought this tube bender, so it's just a manual bender with like a leverage mechanism. I've still got to bolt it down somewhere, but I think it was about 1,500 bucks delivered with, that was including a 32 MB die set and a 40 MB die set. So the tube stuff, the tube guards, I'm gonna make out of 32, and some of the bigger stuff like sliders, I'm gonna be making it out of 40 NB. Alright, before we get cracking on these tube guards, what I've done is taken the springs out and run a string line along the wheels. I did this because the whole diff was sort of pushed out because the panhard rod was sitting at a bit of a funny angle because there's obviously no weight in the car. To try and help with this, I just sort of played around with a few different bits of timber and just jacked it up until the diff was sort of running straight along the string line. I didn't really need to do this, but it sort of just helped get a bit of an eye on everything and just make sure everything's nice and straight. I haven't actually used one of these tube benders before, so I jumped on YouTube, found a few good videos on how to sort of accurately measure how much material you're using for each bend. So the first thing I went and did was made up a bit of a jig to help with this. Put a mark on this inner part of the die and then bolted everything up. Got a bit of tension on everything as well, and then just adjusted this little wire to 0 degrees. Once that was all sorted, I bent the tube to 90 degrees and then put a mark on the tube in line with this other part of the die. Right, on to actually finding these angles. So what we're going to do is, yesterday I sort of marked a bit of a straight edge along here and here, and now I've just zeroed out this angle finder, and we'll just bend this across. So we've got about 49 degrees here, so we know our first bend is 49 degrees. Now with this piece we made before, we obviously have our start mark and our finish mark, and then what I've done is just measured like 10mm increments, and then once we've found our angle, it's 49 degrees, we can, so obviously from this mark on is straight and this mark on is straight, you can sort of see little indents. But once we've found our angle, we just line this up with a straight edge, and then wherever it hits, just say here roughly, so we count 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110 mil of material we're going to use. It starts curving around here-ish. We now know from that point we're going to use 110 mil of material to actually get around this bend and be going straight. So then we can measure what our actual distance we want is. So we'll just go, I'm overhanging mine a little bit, I'm not too worried about material. So we get a measurement from here to here, plus our 110, and then we can sort of accurately measure how much material we want. Now I actually went ahead and bent up this whole piece yesterday, but once we knew our first bend, we could bend this, slide that into position, and then just imagine this tube's going straight. I just marked a mark here and on the tube where it starts to curve, and then pretty much hold my angle piece up or use the angle finder Just got it sitting where it's nice. And then from our mark, just done another mark. So we've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, around 70 mil. So then on this tube, from the first mark, I then measured out 70 mil. And then that is going to line up on our start mark on the tube bender, and that's where we're going to start bending to. And then we're going to bend until whatever angle this is, obviously. We've got these other sections bent up now. As you can see, there's sort of an inside and an outside. I wasn't even going to really attempt to try and sweep these in and do like big sections because I was sort of struggling a little bit as it was. But pretty much from here, I've cut some little tabs and I'm going to weld them onto these, just the inner tube, probably in both ends and then the middle. And I'm going to pack this out because I'm going to be using some 3mm alley to skin these. And then I've got these metal tabs that I was talking about will be welded onto the tube, and then I'm just going to TEX screw it on. Just mocking these up now. I've just run some G-clamps over the top. I actually ended up going the 3mm plus another 1mm, just because I kind of want to put maybe like a rubber under here. Both sections of inner tube are now mounted up, and I've just run a few timbers through the cars, a bit of a straight edge. And in terms of width for these guards, these are just factory rims. I think they're a 0 offset. So I've just got this tube sitting here, sort of covering the tyre on both sides, and I've run a tape measure from this tube to the far one, and I got about 1900. So I'm just going to run with that. I don't really plan on running big offset rims on this because I think it'll look a bit silly having this guard hanging out even further than it is. But I also was tossing up between having this outer tube sort of kick in a little bit, but I definitely would have been better off doing that on this bend, like have that kicked up a little bit and then done this bend, and it would have been nice. But I'll just have it run straight down, and that way it's a little bit more coverage for the wheel. Now I've got a bit of a wild setup going here to try and make these guards straight. So I've just got a level and sort of packed it off the wheel. I went 5mm so that the guard obviously covers the wheel slightly. And then I've just done the same all the way around and chalked it all out and just run a string line out. So what I'll do is pretty much pull this out as soon as it hits the level. I think that distance is about 1905 edge to edge. So yeah, the wheel will be in the guard there. But obviously this will tell me how far out I need to go. The string will tell me how straight I am. And then I've also just gonna run another string from this like straight across, and then that'll tell me roughly how far back to come. And then once we've got all that in position, I might screw this down, and then it'll just be a matter of getting this straight. Right, these are all drilled up now. I've been having a look at charts online, and for a M12 size bolt with a 1.5 pitch thread, it recommends a 10.5mm drill bit. So I'm running with the 1.5 thread instead of the 1.75, just because it's a little bit finer pitch. Just get a little bit more thread into this. I don't think I mentioned, this is just some 12mm plate I had just laying around. So it's probably a little bit overkill, but it's just what I had laying around, so just make use of it. Alrighty guys, I've made up these front brackets now. Pretty much the same process as the ones at the back. But I went out and bought some 10mm plate for the bottom section, and I used 5mm plate for the top because I didn't want it sort of sticking up and being too bulky. But we'll get that welded in there, and then this section will be able to come down into it. Right, I've pretty much got a little coupling in there, a little joiner piece, but I couldn't actually get one in here because it wouldn't have slid in because I did this section first, but that's not the end of the world. I'm not too worried about how strong it's going to be. I sort of chamfered this to get a bit of a better weld penetration. I've also been having a bit of a look at some other people's sort of tube guards, and a lot of people sort of come down here onto the chassis, but I sort of did it this way because I didn't really want this little corner piece exposed. I sort of wanted it to tuck in and hide it. Obviously it's probably not going to be as strong here as directly on top of the chassis, but it is still pretty sturdy. It's on this cross member and a little bit of the chassis, so I'm not too worried about that. Alrighty guys, got the frame made up for the front guards. Obviously I've still got to sheet them. For now, I'm just going to bolt these up and then we can start working on the back ones. Alrighty, finally onto the rear guards. So, I don't know if I've mentioned yet, but I am going to be putting a style side tub on this. So I've just got this bit of cardboard sort of here mocked up, just to give a bit of a visual on it. I'm going to be using a 40 series tub. I was thinking about using a 75 series tub, but they sort of just sit a little bit higher. Now for the shape of the rear guards, I've pretty much just got a bit of conduit. Got a little bit of conduit, copied that front angle, and then obviously just matched it. And even with the 35-inch tyre, it should obviously still hit the guard before the sides. So that's good. Now for this contraption, I pretty much did the same method I did for the front guards and made up this frame. And this will just allow me to sit the tube on it as I'm sort of going. And it's already leveled off this way and this way. And then I've got some marks here, which will allow me to get straight this way as well. As for those marks, I've pretty much got a few measurements. The front guards are actually 1920 edge to edge, and then I just found center of that, which is 960, and then I found center of the chassis, did a center mark on the chassis, and then minus 960 from 585, which gave me the distance from the edge of the chassis to the edge of the guard. So pretty much this distance here to this distance. Forgot to mention, but after my first bend on these guards, I was putting a digital angle finder towards the end of the tube, and then when I did my second bend, everything was nice and straight with each other. Also had some dramas early on with some of the bends because the tube bender itself wasn't actually level, but I packed it up and got that all sorted. With the rear guards, I pretty much got the outer shape made up on both sides, and I'm just going to leave it at that for now. I don't really want to get too ahead of myself before I know what I'm doing with the tub setup, so we'll work on that in the next video. I was also tossing up the idea of welding these little tabs onto the sheet and bolting it onto the tube from the underside, but if you step back and look at the car from a distance, the underside of this whole tube guard is quite visible, so it would have looked a bit funny. bought this rubber on eBay. It's meant for flares and stuff like that. It's got a bit of a C channel in it, which I would have had to cut out my actual guard for, which I wasn't that keen to do. Then I stumbled across this stuff. It should sit in between the 40 series guard and our tube guard, and then the little circle rubber piece will just hide any gaps. Also might look into putting like a little C bit of rubber in the edge of the guards just to tidy everything up, but we'll look at that sort of stuff when it's way down the track, when it's sort of finishing stage. Finally onto the rock sliders. So as you can see here, I've just done up a few sketches of different designs, and then I just mocked up a few different bits and pieces in conduit. With actually mounting the sliders to the car, I was going to do this sort of wraparound chassis method because it's probably the strongest, but I don't really have anything to sort of bend that thickness steel, so I just ended up welding a few more plates onto the chassis. Also decided I wanted to sheet these sliders to match the look of the front guards, and I wanted to put like a bead roller pattern in it. So I went out and bought this cheap manual bead roller. It's only a small one, but it should get the job done. Never actually used a bead roller before, but I thought to myself, I've got all this 3mm aluminium laying around, may as well have a crack with that. And I did a bit more research, and turns out most bead rollers have a capacity of about 1.5mm mild steel, and around the same for aluminium. So I was just sort of marking up this aluminium because it was just so thick, wasn't really rolling it properly. After that, I had a bit of a crack with some thinner steel. It rolled perfect compared to the thicker aluminium, and then I went out and bought a sheet of 1.5mm aluminium. Once I had that, I just cut off a bit of section and then just started experimenting with a few of the different dyes. After I got a bit more confident on the bead roller, I just pretty much followed the same process on the front guards. Just made up a bit of a template, cut out the aluminium, and then we were ready to start bead rolling. that's it for the video today, guys. I've still got to fully weld all the mounts on the guards and sliders, but I'll probably get to that next time I've got the cab lifted off the chassis. But a lot of work went into these guards and sliders, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.